Hi, I'm William,
And I'm Kat,
and this is Info on the Go.
answering questions you want to know.
So, Kat, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about the very first state that,
So, I wonder what state that would be if it's the first state.
the very first one.
And by the way, this is going to be a whole series we're going to do in order of the states that they signed the Constitution, right?
Hmm.
All right.
They
And
ratified it.
I ratified it. Yes, thank you so much. I'm way out there. So, today, I guess we're going to be talking about Delaware.
Delaware was the first state
All right.
to ratify the United States Constitution on December 7th, 1787. Since 1933, the governors of Delaware have proclaimed December 7th as Delaware Day in honor of that day in 1787.
Now, let's dig into the rich history of Delaware on today's show of Info on the Go. Before European settlement, Delaware was inhabited by indigenous people, including the Lenape, or
Yeah.
Delaware, Sequana. Is that how you would say that? Sequana?
Susquehanna.
Susquehanna? Okay, all right. The Nanacook tribes. These groups lived along the rivers and bays, relying on fishing, farming, and hunting.
The English claimed Delaware based on the explorations of John Cabot. He was a navigator and explorer who, by his voyages in 1497 and 1498, helped lay the groundwork for the later British claim to Canada. In 1496, Cabot made a voyage from Bristol with one ship, but he was forced to turn back because of a shortage of food, inclement weather, and disputes with his crew. In May 1497, however, he set sail from Bristol in the small ship Matthew with a crew of 18 men. He proceeded around Ireland and then north and west, making landfall on the morning of June 24th. The exact landing place has never been definitely established, but it's been variously believed to be in southern Labrador, Newfoundland, or Cape Breton Island.
Um, I guess I'm rubbing off on you a little bit. On going ashore, he noticed signs indicating that the area was inhabited but saw no people. Taking possession of the land for England, the English king, he unfurled both the English and
Venetian.
Venetian, oh my gosh, that feels stupid. Venetian flags. He conducted explorations from the ship along the coastline, naming various features Cape Discovery, Island of St. John, St. George Cape, and Trinity Islands, and England's Cape. These may be, respectively, the present day Cape North, St. Paul Island, Cape Ray, St. Pierre, and
Pierre.
Pierre and Magdalene.
Ooh,
Eh,
that one's a different one. That's a
Magellan?
Q. McQuillan.
McQuillan. Okay, yeah, that sounds way better than what I had. And Cape Race, all in the area of Cabot Strait.
In the mistaken belief that he had reached the northeast coast of Asia, Cabot returned to Bristol on August 6, 1497. He reported that the land was excellent, the climate temperate, and the sea covered with enough fish to end England's dependence on Iceland's fish. In the midst of an enthusiastic welcome, he announced his plan to return to his landing place and from there sail westward until he arrived in Japan. On February 3rd, 1498, he received new letters detailing a second expedition. Cabot's second expedition probably consisted of 5 ships and about 200 men. Soon after setting out in 1498, one ship was damaged and sought anchorage in Ireland, suggesting that the fleet had been hit by a severe storm. By 1499, Cabot had been given up for dead.
Considered one of the world's famous explorers, Henry Hudson was born in England, Syria, in
Circa.
considered one of the world's famous explorers. Henry Hudson was born in England, circa
Mm-hmm.
in 1565. He spent his career searching for different routes to Asia, but he ended up opening the door to further exploration and settlement of North America.
In
In
1607 and 1608, Hudson made 2 attempts on behalf of English merchants to find a rumored northeast passage to Cathay, present-day China, via route above the Arctic Circle. In 1609, he landed in North America and explored the region around the modern-day New York metropolitan area, looking for Northwest Passage to Asia on behalf of the Dutch East India Company.
Henry Hudson sailed into the Delaware Bay, which wasn't the Delaware Bay by then, on August 28th, 1609. Besides this, he sailed up the Hudson River, which was later named for him, and thereby laid the foundation for Dutch colonization of the region. While many places bear his name, Henry Hudson remains an elusive figure. In 1631, the Dutch established a short-lived settlement called, what is that? Z Sawanadale?
Swanendale?
Swanendale, nearby present-day Lewis?
I would say lose.
Lose, okay. It was destroyed by conflict with the local Lenape.
In 1638, the Swedish settlers established Fort Christina, known today as modern Wilmington, marking the marking the start of the Swedish colony of New Sweden.
And
In 1655, the Dutch reclaimed the area, absorbing New Sweden into New Netherland. In 1664, the English seized control of the region, and Delaware became part of the province of Pennsylvania under the rule of William Penn.
so think about it, Delaware wasn't even its own colony. It was part of Pennsylvania.
Right.
Colonial era. The Delaware colony, officially known as the Three Lower Counties of the Delaware, was a semi-autonomous region of the Proprietary Province of Pennsylvania and a de facto British colony in North America. Although not royally sanctioned, Delaware consisted of the three counties on the west bank of the Delaware River Bay. The three lower counties on the Delaware River were governed as part of the province of Pennsylvania from 1682 until 1701, when the lower counties um, positioned
Petitioned.
petitioned. Yeah, it was in my brain. It just didn't come out of my mouth.
Fair enough.
Petitioned for and were granted an independent colony legislature.
Colonial legislature.
Colonial legislature. Oh my gosh, I'm way off, man.
It's all good.
The two colonies shared the same governor until 1776. The English colonists who settled in Delaware were mainly Quakers.
Quakers were founded by George Fox, who believed that God was present within people rather than in churches. The name Quaker may have originated from Fox telling a judge to quake before the authority of God. Quakers have influenced culture and society and played a key role in the abolitionist and women's rights movements.
In the first half of the 18th century, Newcastle and Philadelphia became the primary ports of entry into the New World for a quarter of a million Protestant immigrants from Ulster,
Mm-hmm.
referred to as Scottish, Scot Irish in America, or Ulster Scots in Ireland. Delaware had no established religion at this time.
The American Revolutionary War began in April 1775, and on June 15th, 1776, the Delaware Assembly voted to break all ties with Great Britain, creating the independent state of Delaware. On July 4th, 1776, Delaware joined 12 other British colonies to form the United States of America.
The
The
oldest black church in the country was chartered in Delaware by former slave Peter Spencer in 1813 as the Union Church of Africans, which is now the AUMP Church. The Big August Quarterly, which began in 1814, is still celebrated and is the oldest such cultural festival in the country. Man, that is like huge. 1813
right.
and still there.
Yes, that is amazing.
I think Peter Spencer deserves his own episode. I did a little research into him, and I didn't want to include too much in this particular episode because it's all about Delaware. But I really think Peter Spencer is definitely worthy of his own episode.
I agree wholeheartedly. So, the 19th century, growth in the Civil War. Slavery had been a divisive issue in Delaware for decades before the American Civil War began. Opposition to slavery in Delaware, imported from Quaker dominated Pennsylvania, led many slave owners to free their slaves. Half of the state's black population was free by 1810, and more than 90% were free by 1860. This trend also led pro slavery legislators to restrict free black organizations and the constabulary, which is the police station, in Wilmington, was accused of harsh enforcement of runaway slave laws. While many Delawareans kidnapped free blacks among the large communities throughout the state and sold them to plantations further south.
During the Civil War, Delaware was a slave state that remained in the Union. Delaware voters voted not to succeed on January 3rd, 1861. Although most Delaware citizens who fought in the Civil War served in regiments on the Union side, some did in fact serve in Delaware companies on the Confederate side. In the Maryland and Virginia regiments, Delaware was the one slave state from which the Confederate States of America could not recruit a full regiment. That is like huge. So there was some that fought for Maryland and Virginia, but Delaware itself did not have a Confederate regiment.
Mm-mm.
And I did not know that. Like it was the only, I'm
Its own
assuming,
little state was so divided.
yeah, e- that is huge.
That's crazy. But I mean, that's what they meant when like families were fighting families, brother fighting brother, and everything like that. I mean, because Delaware is not a big state at all.
It is not. It is not. And I don't, its population, I'm not sure what it is today, but I, I tell you what, I'll read this. Will you look and see what their population is today?
Yeah,
Okay. On February 8th, 1865, 2 months before the end of the Civil War, Delaware voted to reject the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and so voted to continue slavery beyond the Civil War. However, the gesture proved futile when other states ratified the amendment, which took effect in December 1865 and thereby ended slavery in Delaware. In a symbolic move, Delaware belatedly ratified the amendment on February 12th, 1901, 35 years after national ratification and 38 years after Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Delaware also rejected the 14th Amendment and 15th Amendment during the Reconstitution era.
that's insane.
That's
It's
that
it's
is
it's ridiculous if you ask me. But so their
absolutely,
population today is a little over a million. So it's like 1,444,320.
and that's for the whole state.
Yeah,
Wow. The
that's a
first
little
state
more.
and the smallest state.
Right.
Well, I
I don't
don't know
think
if
it's the
it's the
smallest
smallest.
state.
No,
Um, but for them to just blatantly continue with slavery for that long after the amendments and the presidential proclamation irks me. Irks me very
just a
much.
little bit. We should do one on Reconstruction, the South Reconstruction, because that was huge too.
Yeah. So the 20th century modernization and civil rights. After the Civil War, Democratic governments continued to dominate the South in former slave states. The Delaware legislature declared blacks to be second class citizens in 1866 and restricted their voting rights despite the 15th Amendment, ensuring continued Democratic success in the state throughout most of the 19th century. Fearful that the 1875 Civil Rights Act passed by Congress might establish social equality, Delaware legislators passed Jim Crow laws that mandated racial segregation in public facilities and effectively codified the state's tradition.
Just to be clear, Delaware was not the only southern state that passed these Jim Crow laws. They were in all of the southern states and some of
And
the northern states as well. I guess that needs to be a whole nother podcast. That could be a whole nother show on its own, the Jim Crow laws and what, but that comes from Reconstruction.
right. So
In 1952, Gilbert, no, that's not Gilbert, that's Gebhardt.
I would say Gebhardt.
Okay. In 1950, Gebhardt versus Belton was decided by the Delaware Court of Chancery and
Hmm.
affirmed by the Delaware Supreme Court in the same year. Gebhardt was one of the five cases combined into Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 decision of the United States Supreme Court, which found racial segregation in the United States in public schools to be unconstitutional.
Which is
There
true. I mean, it was.
it yes, absolutely. And there's we could do a whole podcast on the Gebhardt and Belton decision in Delaware. I chose to kind of keep it kind of bring it down just a little bit when I was doing the research here.
Right.
The result of the Gebhardt and Brown legislation was that
Litigation.
litigation was that Delaware became fully integrated. Albert, uh, with time and much effort,
Albeit.
albeit with time and much effort. The white supremacist Bryant Bowles raised $6,000 and founded the National Association of the Advancement of White People, NAAWP, to oppose the rulings. Bowles briefly attracted nationwide attention for leading the pro-segregation
Boy,
boycott of Melford High School. I'm telling you, man, I'm all over it. A mass meeting in Melford in October 1954 attracted a crowd of 3,000 people. Bowles encouraged a boycott to protest the integration of schools after 11 black students were enrolled in the previously racially segregated school. Only 456 out of the 1,562 students attended the next day, and the movement gained traction in the nearby town of Lincoln, where 116 of the 146 pupils in the local elementary school boycotted in solidarity. Solidarity. Wow, man, that is insane.
that's awful. And not to mention those 11 black students were probably horribly bullied. Horrible.
Well,
There's probably horrible things that happened to them.
yeah, and that that is crazy.
It's
Um,
it's awful. Is what it was. Like the small mindedness, the audacity of it all. Just
yeah,
oof.
yeah, that's crazy.
Mm-mm. Mass protests continued in Milford. The school board eventually ceded to the protesters, expelling the black students. Several weeks later, Bowles was arrested for conspiring to violate the state education law by leading a boycott at Milford's integrated high school. The attorney general later took action to revoke the NAACP's, is it supposed to be WP's, right?
Yeah.
The NAACP's corporate charter in September 1955. However, the ensuing unrest, which included cross burnings, rallies, and pro segregation demonstrations, contributed to desegregation in most of southern Delaware being delayed for another 10 years. School segregation in the state would not end until 1967.
So the
That is insane to me.
54, the law was passed, and it took to 67. Wow, yeah, that is crazy.
Oof,
So that is so recent. And I just can't even believe it took that long.
me either.
Yeah.
Me either. During the civil rights movement, Delaware was an important battleground as the state experienced school desegregation following the Supreme Court's 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision.
Today, since the turn of the 20th century, Delaware has become an onshore corporation for corporate
Corporate.
haven for corporate laws as deemed appealing to corporations. Over half of all the New York Stock Exchange listed corporations and over three-fifths of the Fortune 500 companies are legally incorporated in Delaware. I know we did an episode on John Deere and we made a joke about it's not listed, it's not in Delaware. Um,
No,
so I'll name a few real quick. DuPont and the DuPont family has done a lot for Delaware, and we could probably do a whole lot on that. Alphabet or Google, Amazon, AT&T, Verizon, Ford, Walmart, Coca-Cola, and General Motors, just to name a few.
Over 90% of all US based companies that went public in 2021 incorporated themselves in Delaware.
Hey, and here we go. Here's the population of the of the state. I forgot I included this. With a population of under 1 million, it maintains a balance of historical preservation and modern development.
Delaware's history reflects a blend of indigenous heritage, European colonization, and early contributions to the U.S. statehood, making it a unique and historically rich state.
And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot from our listeners out in Delaware about being in the first state. Um, that's pretty much all we have on Delaware. Do you, if you, we're a new podcast, if you would please follow us, like us, leave us a review. I'll let
Yeah.
Kat read it so I don't mess it up.
I make no promises.
With that
Uh,
being said, I guess that's going to conclude this show.
yeah, we'll have to do other states and their atrocious behavior towards segregation.
Sure. And then stay tuned because we're going to do the second state, which will be coming up soon. Hey, Kat, I think we forgot to mention what the capital of Delaware is.
I think so. It is Dover.
And with that
Capital
being said, go ahead.
the capital of Delaware is Dover.
Is
Kind
Dover.
of like the cliffs of Dover.
Absolutely. With that being said, that will conclude this podcast. Thank you for listening. And we're going to leave you hanging with that. This is
Catch
info
you
on the
next,
go.
and we'll catch you next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.